Greetings, my magnificent ones. Sue Paulson here, your magnificence mentor. Today, I want to chat a little bit about some observations I've had recently, both within myself and also observations of other people's challenges and behaviors and so on. It has to do with the misery that we sometimes put ourselves through that is largely self-induced. So, first of all, let's think about how individuals such as you, such as me, all kinds of people that you know, you've watched them exhibit great courage, tremendous resilience in spite of all that's been thrown at them in their lives. They've gone above and beyond the call of duty. They've risen to the occasion time after time after time, and had the courage to just forge ahead regardless of obstacles in their way and whatever was going on that didn't work out the way they were wanting it to. So we know we have, as human beings, this tremendous storehouse of talents and skills and experience that gets us through. And you think of the athlete who starts off thinking he or she wants to run a marathon, and the time and the effort and the endurance that they build up over time that it takes in order to be able to go the distance. So that pulls on reserves inside of us that we may not have known were there before. So there's a lot of fortitude that comes into that, and a lot of determination to succeed regardless. So we have that, and we exert it lots in our everyday physical lives, and yet still I don't see that many people saying that, oh well, yeah, I'm living heaven on earth, like this is just the best life ever and things are going well for me. I don't hear that. I don't observe that. What I observe and what I hear is an awful lot of people going through misery after misery after misery. Their circumstances are such that it's hard to get up and face the day. They're in almost below survival level, just scratching and clawing to get through the day and then get through another day and then get through another day. And some of that is a factor of our circumstances that come at us with challenges with jobs and poverty and homelessness and all of those kinds of things. And no question, in my neck of the woods, I noticed the cost of grocery just rising and rising and rising, and you never quite know what the gas is going to cost to put in your car. So it's a hardship, but it's amazing to me how well people do manage despite all of that. So let's face it, there's lots of things that we don't have what we could consider a lot of control over. I certainly don't have any control over the grocery prices. However, what I do have control over is where I spend my money. So rather than spending it on a $10 item, I might look for a sale tag or buy a brand that maybe isn't as popular but is less priced, the generic kinds of stuff and so on. So that's where I have control in what I pick to put in my grocery cart, with the goal that at the end of it, it isn't going to cost me as much as it would have if I had just disregarded, doesn't matter what price it is, just put it in the cart. So I have some measure of control, and so do you. There's another point of control that we do have that I don't find most of us spending a lot of time or energy working through or working on. And that's in the area of our minds and our hearts. So one of the biggest challenges that we're faced with that we don't often recognize, is kind of a quiet, silent enemy, if you will, that is a formidable teacher if we allow it to have its say, if we allow it to give it room. And that's in the arena of our beliefs and our attitudes about how we move forward. Now, somebody once said that most people have stinking thinking, and I thought about that, and I wonder what they mean by that. Well, of course, we know we're living in a world of contrasts. We have highly optimistic, very positive people, and we have people who are extremely pessimistic and very negative in their outlook on life. Now, I've always erred on the side of the optimistic scale. People have accused me of being a Pollyanna. I confess that's me, and I like it, quite honestly. So it bothers me to hang out in the negative side of things. Was that always the case? No. There was a point in my life when I hung out in the negative. I didn't see much right with my world. I didn't see much right with me. And as a result, I was Miss Doom and Gloom. And it wasn't a whole lot of fun. In fact, it was, if I had a label for it in those days when I was younger, I would have said, yeah, it's kind of hell on earth. Well, at some point, I decided that a change was in order. And I began to look at, and I have to confess that maybe the original Pollyanna in the movie had some influence, because I was about 11 when I saw that movie. And here's this young miss who comes from both her parents having died. She'd been about to go into an orphanage until they found a long lost relative who they shipped her off to. And the environment that she went into, this poor little waif who, you know, had a good upbringing, but now no parents and nobody to care for her, moves in with this curmudgeonly aunt who doesn't have a lot of good to say about anything or anybody in the world, including Miss Pollyanna, who was sadly dressed and looking like the orphan that she had become. And so Auntie has lots of money and standing in the community, so this did not sit well with her. And of course, she subscribed to the notion that children should be seen and not heard. And in fact, she would have preferred that they be not seen and not heard. So she set about setting up the circumstances to kind of force her ideas on her niece so that she would behave and she wouldn't cause a problem and so on. Well, this exuberant child was not going to be put down to that extent. And she had been taught by her dad, who had been a former pastor. She'd been taught the glad game and taught that didn't matter how bad circumstances were, you could find something good in anything. You could find something to be glad about. So when I watched that movie, there was a shift, and I don't think I even knew it at the time. But when I watched how she was able to achieve many wonderful things against all odds, and in the face of lots of displeasure and disapproval and adversity that she faced, and she rose above it. Well, how did she do that? Because she found something to be glad about. No matter how bad things were, she found that nugget of blessedness or goodness in everything. So it was a huge gift that I got in those days, and I'm so thrilled that I've been able to carry that forward for all these years, so that even in my darkest hours, of which I've had many, I've been able to find, okay, somewhere here there's a blessing, there's a gift, so I've maintained my sense of optimism about my place in the world itself, other people around me, that there's goodness wherever we look. So it's an attitude that's come about, and I'm grateful for that. So that part I seem to be figuring out and have managed well. The part, though, that's a little sneakier and a little more insidious, it relates to our beliefs. which for the most part were given to us when we were younger by those of us in those surrounding us who looked after us and were in authority. So those were the ones that told us, don't toot your own horn. You aren't anybody special. Don't think that you're better than anybody else. You're meant to serve and look after people, never mind about your own needs. Those kinds of messages that just got inserted in a variety of ways. And of course, we were too young to think about, well, what about that? Is that really true? Or we had no reasoning ability, nor did we have any power to dispute that. And so we might have quietly rebelled in our own little ways, but it didn't get us very far. So these beliefs take root, the seeds are there, and they burrow in to the point where then we believe them. Then we feel that that's our belief is, I'm not worth that much. I'm not able to do this, and that makes me less than, and no matter how hard I try, I can never get ahead. And so all these messages that we got from others, because those were their beliefs, they're passed on to us. And so if we never examine them, if we never do anything about them, then that's the way it is for us. Then what's the quote from, I think it was Henry Ford, somebody like that said, whether you can or you can't, whether you believe you can or believe you can't, you're right. And so that's just the fact of the matter. If you believe you can't or you believe you aren't, well, that's true for you. However, if you take it apart and say, is that really true? How do I know that's true? Where did that come from? I know when I've done that and explored and investigated a variety of these little tracks, I realized that a lot of my guilt and my shame over my past had very little to do with me personally. It was just because I stepped over somebody else's line. I violated something that was dear to them, that they valued. It had nothing to do particularly with me personally. So as I began to explore these different pathways, I began to understand that I was a lot more. Now, so of course what had to happen was first to examine the belief and say, well, is that really true? And if you don't believe that it's true, then you need to monitor your thinking about that. So if I have this, let's say, for example, I have a belief that I'm undeserving, I'm unworthy of all good things in life, like I'm worthless. Well, if I believe that, then my thinking patterns are going to model that. And then, of course, like any self-fulfilling prophecy, then that comes about. Well, nothing ever good happens to me. Oh, well, yeah, I have this evidence and that evidence and that evidence. Well, why do I have that evidence? Because I think that nothing good is ever going to happen to me, and so it doesn't. Well, where does that thinking come from? Well, that thinking comes from feeling unworthy, that I was told maybe over and over and over in my very young years, well, you're worthless, you're stupid, you're no good at that, blah, blah, blah. And so well, they're bigger than me, they're older than me, they must know best, and so I guess that's true. But as adults, when we examine it, we realize, wait a minute, that's not true. I have lots of evidence to the contrary of things that I have achieved, things I've overcome, wonderful things that I've been able to accomplish that fly in the face of that, well, you're not worth anything. So when I began to not only examine that and then monitor my thinking, I'd catch myself realizing that some of that stinking thinking would creep in, maybe because I was overtired, maybe because somebody had said something to me that upset me or hurt me. Maybe I had a fight with someone, and then some of that old program just swooped in and took over my thought process. Well, we're good at fighting against adversity physically, but we're not necessarily that skilled in grabbing a hold of those thoughts and say, no, 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 I'm not going down that path. That is not where I'm going to go. I've changed my mind about that. Well, we do have the ability to change our minds. And when we change our minds about something, then that can naturally lead to changing our thoughts. As long as we're diligent, as long as we're continually working on that and saying, no, I'm not thinking that way anymore. That's wrong. That's false for me. I'm going this path instead. And so we rein ourselves in and put ourselves back on the path that we want instead of back off the path that has never done us any good, kept us in misery. And we're saying, no, no, we're going for the gold now. Heaven on earth is my goal. I'm magnificent enough that I can do that. And so I need my force of will, my willpower. I will change directions here and think this instead of this. I don't see a lot of people spending as much time on that as they do on the physical aspects of their life. And let me tell you that if you aren't willing to examine that part of your own makeup and your own psyche, then you miss out on an awful lot that is already going for you if you would just choose it, if you would just pick it. And we have that ability to choose. That's something we have control over. So I want to encourage you this week to really look at what happens with your thinking process. Catch yourself thinking stinking thoughts and say, whoa, where did that come? Why am I doing that? What's that all about? And spend a little time just focusing on it so that you then can say, okay, wait a minute. What's a better thought? How am I going to work myself away from that and towards what I really want to think about, what is really true for me? That's really what you're after, is what is really true for me. The contrast is there. Well, if I don't like this, then I need to spend a little effort and time focusing on what I do want. And that's the road. That's the route to more happiness, more peace, more joy, and voila, heaven on earth. So I know you're magnificent enough to do this. So I encourage you this week to spend a little time on your own thinking processes and your own belief systems and challenge them. I guarantee you, as you resolve one, then another one will be resolved and another one will be resolved. Will you ever finish? Well, it hasn't been my experience that we finish. My experience is we keep fine-tuning and fine-tuning and fine-tuning, and then as those nasty, unproductive thoughts gradually loosen their hold on you, then you have more contentment, more peace, and they don't try to rattle you like they used to. You might get tested every once in a while, but you'll know when you pass the test. So go forth, be your magnificent selves, and we will see you next time.